Margaret Stone pressed send on the message that would end her life. $20,000. Untraceable cryptocurrency. A professional who promised it would look like she'd simply fallen asleep. The confirmation came back in seconds. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. She set the phone down with shaking hands and stared at the ceiling of her penthouse 42 floors above a city that would forget her name within a week. But when the door opened the next afternoon, the man standing there wasn't holding what she'd paid for. He was holding a wrench. And somehow, that changed everything. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. You won't believe what happens next. The buzzer rang at exactly 4 p.m. Margaret had been lying in the same position for 3 hours watching the clock like it was counting down to an execution. Which, in a way, it was. Her execution. Her choice. Her terms. She'd rehearsed this moment a dozen times in her head. The professional would come in quietly. She'd already be positioned on the bed. He'd confirm the payment ask if she was certain they always asked. She'd read in the forums. And then it would be over. Clean. Fast. Dignified. Better than the alternative. Better than 6 more months of the tumor eating through her pancreas, while the board circled like vultures, and Richard Hayes smiled his snake smile across the conference table, waiting for her to be weak enough to devour. The door clicked open. Margaret kept her eyes closed. Easier that way. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just hurry up. I'm ready." Silence. Then, "Ma'am, I think there's been some confusion." Margaret's eyes flew open. The man standing in her foyer wasn't dressed in the nondescript dark clothing she'd expected. He wore navy blue work pants and a matching shirt with Torres Building Services embroidered over the pocket. He was maybe 40 with calloused hands and concerned eyes, and he was holding a red toolbox like it was a shield. Horror flooded through her, hot and immediate. "Get out!" Her voice cracked. "I didn't call for maintenance. Get out right now." But Daniel Torres didn't move. His gaze had already traveled past her to the nightstand, the prescription bottles lined up like soldiers, the oxygen monitor, the medical alert bracelet she'd forgotten to take off. "Building manager sent me," he said quietly. "Said your heat's been out for 2 days. It's 58 degrees in here, ma'am. That's not safe for someone who's—" He stopped himself. "For anyone." "I don't care about the heat." Margaret tried to sit up, failed, hated herself for the weakness. "I didn't request this. Leave." "I can't do that." Daniel set the toolbox down gently like he was afraid of startling her. "City code says residential units can't drop below 60 degrees. Liability issue. I just need to check the furnace, make sure it's not a carbon monoxide situation." "There's no carbon monoxide. The heat is fine. Everything is fine. I want you to leave." "The thermostat outside says 58. "Then the thermostat is broken." "Maybe." Daniel met her eyes, and something in his expression made Margaret's next words die in her throat. "But I still need to check. Won't take more than 20 minutes. You won't even know I'm here." He picked up the toolbox and headed toward the utility closet before she could argue further. Margaret lay there, fury and humiliation warring in her chest. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She'd planned everything so carefully. Transferred the cryptocurrency through 3 different wallets, used a VPN, cleared her browser history, set up an auto email to her attorney for 6 p.m. with final instructions. And now, there was a maintenance man in her apartment, checking her furnace, treating her like she was just another tenant with a broken heater, instead of a dying woman who'd finally found the courage to end things on her own terms. She grabbed her phone. The forum was still open. She typed quickly. "Someone came early. Wrong person. When will the professional arrive?" The response came in seconds. "Payment received for tomorrow, 8 p.m. No one dispatched today. Confirm your address." Margaret stared at the screen. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., which meant the man in her utility closet wasn't here for her at all. She heard him working the clang of metal, the hiss of a pilot light. the low murmur of him talking to himself in Spanish as he diagnosed the problem. The sounds of someone who actually fixed things for a living. Someone who showed up when called and made broken things work again. Margaret hadn't fixed anything in months. She'd only broken things. Broken her body by ignoring the symptoms too long. Broken her company by being too proud to name a successor. Broken whatever remained of her relationships by refusing to tell anyone she was dying. Richard knew, of course. Richard always knew everything. He'd been making sympathetic noises in meetings for weeks, while simultaneously positioning himself as the logical choice for CEO when she finally collapsed. She'd seen the emails he thought he'd deleted, seen the private dinners with board members, seen the way he smiled when she had to leave meetings early because the pain was too much. He was probably hoping she'd die in the office, make it dramatic, give him a good story to tell at the memorial service he'd insist on planning. Well, she wouldn't give him that satisfaction. The furnace kicked on with a mechanical groan. Daniel emerged from the utility closet, wiping his hands on a rag. Pilot light was out. Thermocouple probably needs replacing, but I got it working for now. Should heat up in the next hour. Fine, thank you. You can go now. But Daniel didn't head for the door. Instead, he stood there, rag in hand, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I'm going to say something, he said finally, and you can tell me it's none of my business. You'd be right. But I'm going to say it anyway. Margaret's jaw tightened. Don't. My wife died 3 years ago. Leukemia. She fought for 2 years and then she died for 3 months. His voice was matter of fact, but his hands tightened on the rag. Toward the end, she asked the doctor to increase the morphine. Keep increasing it until she didn't wake up. Doctor said he couldn't do that. So she asked me to do it, to hold the pillow, to make it fast. Margaret's breath caught. I didn't, Daniel continued. Not because I didn't love her, because I did. Because I loved her enough to sit with her while it hurt. Every single day, every single hour, until her body finally let her go. He paused. I'm not saying what you should or shouldn't do. That's not my place. I'm just saying... His voice cracked slightly. I'm just saying that the worst thing you can do to someone who's drowning is pretend you don't see the water. Silence filled the penthouse. Margaret couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except stare at this stranger who'd somehow seen through her expensive sheets and her careful planning to the ugly, terrified truth underneath. The furnace should hold for a few days, Daniel said, his voice back to professional neutrality. But that thermocouple needs replacing. I'll put in the order. Someone will be back next week to install it. He headed for the door. Wait. The word came out before Margaret could stop it. Daniel turned. Why are you telling me this? Margaret asked. You don't know me. You don't know anything about my life or my choices. Why do you care? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then, my daughter asked me this morning why some people live in the clouds while other people fix the clouds. I didn't have a good answer. He met her eyes. Maybe this is the answer. Maybe people in the clouds need fixing too. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. He left before Margaret could respond. She lay there, in her slowly warming penthouse, staring at the door he'd closed behind him. Her phone buzzed. The forum confirmed for tomorrow 8 p.m. Final payment due upon arrival. Margaret's finger hovered over the confirmation button. She thought about Daniel's wife, about asking someone to hold the pillow, about dying for 3 months instead of fighting for 2 years. She thought about Richard Hayes and his snake smile and the company she'd built from nothing. She thought about a maintenance man's daughter who apparently asked philosophical questions about people who lived in clouds. And for the first time in 6 months, Margaret Stone did something she hadn't allowed herself to do. She hesitated. 3 days later, the buzzer rang again. Margaret had deleted the forum thread 2 days ago, hadn't confirmed the appointment, hadn't sent the final payment. The professional had messaged once, confirm or cancel by noon, and she'd let the deadline pass without responding. She told herself it was just postponement. She'd reschedule when she was ready. When the pain got worse. When Richard made his next move. When she'd had enough. But she hadn't rescheduled. And now someone was at her door again. "It's Daniel Torres, Building Services," a voice called through the intercom. "Here to replace that thermocouple." Margaret almost didn't answer. She was having a bad day, had vomited twice that morning, couldn't keep down anything except water, and the pain medication made her feel like she was watching her life through frosted glass. But she pressed the button anyway. "Come in." Daniel let himself in, toolbox in one hand and something else in the other. A container. "Before you say anything," he started, "I know this is weird, but my daughter Emma, she heard I was coming here today and she made you soup." He held it up almost apologetically. "Chicken noodle, with star-shaped pasta. She's 8. She doesn't really understand boundaries yet." Margaret stared at the container. "Your daughter made me soup." "She did. She said sick people need soup, and when I tried to explain that you probably didn't want food from strangers, she informed me that I don't know everything." A small smile. "She's right about that." "I can't eat soup." Margaret's voice came out harsher than she intended. "I can't keep anything down except water and medication. Your daughter wasted her time." "Maybe. But she didn't make it for you to eat." Daniel set the container on the entryway table. "She made it because making soup for people who need it is what you do. That's what her mom used to do. Bring soup to neighbors, to patients at the clinic where she worked, to anyone who was hurting." He picked up his toolbox. "Emma's learning to do the same thing, so even if you pour it down the drain, it wasn't wasted. It was practice." He headed toward the utility closet. Margaret looked at the container. Condensation beaded on the plastic lid, still warm. Made by an 8-year-old girl who thought star-shaped pasta could heal strangers. She opened it. The smell hit her first: chicken broth, carrot, celery, and something else. Something that smelled like someone had actually cared while making it. Her stomach turned over, threatening revolt. But she took a spoonful anyway. The broth was too salty. The pasta was overcooked. The vegetables were cut unevenly, clearly, by small, inexperienced hands. It was the best thing she'd tasted in 6 months. Margaret took another spoonful. Then another. Her stomach protested, but she ignored it. She ate half the container before the nausea became too much, and even then, she didn't throw up immediately. She kept it down for almost 10 minutes. That was a victory. Daniel emerged from the utility closet. "All set. New thermocouple installed. Should be good for another 5 years." He noticed the half-empty container. "You ate it." "Some of it." "Did it stay down?" The question was asked so casually, without pity or judgment, that Margaret answered honestly. "For a little while, longer than most things." Daniel nodded. "Emma will be glad to hear that. She's been worried." "She doesn't even know me." "She knows you're sick. That's enough for her." He packed up his tools. "I told her about you. Not details, just that I met someone who wasn't feeling well. She wanted to know your name, your favorite color, whether you liked dogs or cats." He smiled. "I didn't have answers for any of it. So she decided your favorite color was purple because that's hers, and she drew you a picture." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and set it on the counter. "You don't have to keep it, but she asked me to make sure you got it." Margaret unfolded the paper after he left. The drawing was typical 8-year-old art stick figures, a bright yellow sun, a house with a triangle roof. But in the corner, drawn with careful purple crayon, was a figure wearing what looked like a cape. Under it, in wobbly handwriting, "You can be a superhero even if you're sick. Love, Emma." Margaret traced the purple cape with one finger. No one had called her a hero in 30 years. Not since she'd first started Stone Enterprises in her father's garage, working 18-hour days to prove that a woman could build something that mattered. Now she was just a dying CEO with no successor, and a CFO circling like a shark. But an 8-year-old girl who'd never met her thought she could be a superhero. Margaret folded the drawing carefully and placed it on her nightstand next to the prescription bottles. Then she opened her laptop for the first time in 3 weeks. 473 unread emails. She started reading. Margaret made it through 50 emails before she had to stop her hands shaking too hard to type. Most were routine status updates, approval requests, meeting invitations she'd missed. But buried in them was a thread that made her blood run cold despite the fever burning through her body. Subject: Transition Planning Committee, confidential. From Richard Hayes to board members: Marcus Chen, Patricia Wolfe, and David Singh. She wasn't copied. Margaret clicked it open, already knowing what she'd find. Given Margaret's extended medical leave and continued absence from strategic decisions, I propose we formalize interim leadership protocols. The market is already responding negatively to the perceived vacuum at the top. We need stability, and we need it now. I've prepared a preliminary restructuring plan that would position me as acting CEO while Margaret focuses on her health. I'm attaching financial projections showing how we can actually grow during this transition. Several acquisition opportunities have opened up precisely because competitors perceive us as vulnerable. Let's discuss this at Thursday's executive session. Margaret need not be involved at this stage, no point in adding stress while she's recovering. Margaret read it 3 times, recovering, as if she were getting better, as if this were temporary, as if Richard actually believed she'd come back and reclaim her position. He knew she was dying. She'd seen him outside her oncologist's office 2 months ago, watched him talk to her doctor in the parking lot. The conversation had been brief, but the look on Richard's face afterward told her everything she needed to know. He'd been planning this for months. She opened the attachment. The restructuring plan was brilliant, she had to give him that. Richard had identified 3 mid-sized competitors who were struggling, outlined acquisition terms that would actually increase shareholder value, positioned himself as the visionary leader who could execute the plan. He'd even included a section on legacy protection, promising to honor Margaret's contributions while building on her foundation for future growth. It was a masterpiece of corporate maneuvering. It was also based entirely on assets he had no authority to leverage and contracts he had no power to sign. Yet, Margaret's hands stopped shaking. She opened a new email to her attorney Samuel Rodriguez. They'd worked together for 20 years. If anyone could be trusted with what she was about to ask, it was Sam. Sam, need you to pull complete financials on every transaction Richard Hayes has authorized in the past 6 months. Every contract, every vendor payment, every expense report. I want to see his digital signature on everything cross-referenced with actual board approval minutes. Also, need you to freeze my access to certain accounts. Make it look like I'm too sick to manage them. I want Richard to think he's winning. Can you be here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.? Don't tell anyone you're coming. Margaret. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Her phone immediately rang. Sam. Margaret, Jesus, we've been trying to reach you for weeks. Are you okay? No, she said honestly, but I'm not dead yet either. Can you do what I asked? Of course, but Margaret, what's going on? This sounds like I think Richard is stealing from me. That's because I do think that. I just need to prove it. She paused. And I need to do it before I run out of time. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, how much time? Enough. Maybe. I don't know. Margaret looked at Emma's drawing on the nightstand. But I'm going to use whatever I have left to make sure that snake doesn't get my company. I'll be there at 9. After Sam hung up, Margaret sat with her laptop staring at Richard's email. She thought about the forum thread she'd deleted. The professional who would have arrived at 8 p.m. made it quick, made it clean. The easy way out. But there was nothing easy about letting Richard Hayes win. And somewhere in this building, an 8-year-old girl thought she could be a superhero. Margaret picked up her phone and typed a text to Daniel Torres. She'd found his number in the building services directory. Tell Emma the soup helped. I kept some of it down. Thank you. She hit send, then added, also, Does she take requests? I might need more soup. This could take a while. The response came back quickly. She says she can make soup every Tuesday and Friday. Says those are good luck days. I tried to explain, that's not how luck works. She says I don't know everything. Margaret smiled. It hurt her face. She'd forgotten what smiling felt like. She typed back, she's right. You don't know everything. Tell her Tuesday and Friday work perfectly. And tell her the purple cape in the drawing is perfect too. Will do. She'll be happy to hear that. Margaret set the phone down and went back to her laptop. 423 emails to go, a CFO to catch, a company to save, and apparently soup every Tuesday and Friday. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was more than she'd had 3 days ago when she'd been lying in bed waiting to die. Sometimes Margaret thought as she opened the next email, the difference between giving up and fighting back was as simple as a maintenance man who refused to pretend he didn't see you drowning, and an 8-year-old girl who made soup with star-shaped pasta because sick people needed something to hold on to. Even if that something was just the idea that someone somewhere thought you were worth saving. Margaret kept reading. Outside her window, the sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky purple, Emma's favorite color. Maybe the kid was on to something after all. Samuel Rodriguez arrived at exactly 9 a.m. on Thursday, carrying 2 briefcases and the expression of a man who'd spent all night digging through financial records. Margaret had managed to shower and dress in real clothes for the first time in weeks. The effort left her trembling and nauseated, but she refused to meet her attorney while looking like a corpse. She'd learned early in her career that appearance mattered even when, especially when you were fighting for survival. Sam set both briefcases on the dining table and opened the first one without preamble. "You were right to be suspicious," he said. "Richard's been systematically moving money for the past 4 months. Small amounts at first buried in legitimate operational expenses. But it's escalated significantly in the last 6 weeks. How much?" "That I can prove 3.2 million. But Margaret," Sam pulled out a thick folder, "I think it's more, a lot more. He's been selling company assets to shell corporations, then having those corporations sell to Meridian Corp at market value. The shell companies exist just long enough to make the transactions look legitimate, then they dissolve." Margaret's hands tightened on the armrest of her chair. "Meridian, Marcus Chen's company. The same Marcus Chen who's on your board, the same Marcus Chen who's copied on Richard's restructuring proposal." Sam opened the second briefcase. "I pulled phone records. Richard and Chen have been in contact almost daily for 3 months. Lunches, dinners, meetings at Chen's office. Show me everything." For the next hour, Sam walked Margaret through the evidence. Bank statements with suspicious transfers. Contracts with forged approval signatures. Email chains between Richard and shell company representatives that were clearly fake accounts. And buried in the middle of it all, a document that made Margaret's blood run cold. A pre-signed agreement selling Stone Enterprises' patent portfolio to Meridian Corp for $60 million, roughly a third of its actual value. The signature line said, "Margaret Stone, CEO." But Margaret had never seen the document before. "That's fraud," she said quietly. "That's not just embezzlement. He's actively sabotaging the company. And setting himself up to buy the pieces when it collapses." Sam pulled out another folder. "I found preliminary acquisition documents. Richard's been meeting with private equity firms. The plan seems to be drive down Stone Enterprises' value through strategic asset sales and public uncertainty about leadership, then swoop in with outside funding to acquire controlling interest at a discount. While I'm too sick to fight back. Or dead." Sam said it bluntly, without apology. "Margaret, I have to ask, how long do you have?" She looked at him. This man who'd negotiated every major deal of her career, who'd been in the room when she'd incorporated Stone Enterprises, who'd drafted her will and her divorce papers, and every contract that mattered. Oncologists said 6 to 8 months 4 months ago, so 2 to 4 months maybe. Less if I keep pushing myself like this. Sam closed his eyes briefly. I'm sorry. Don't be. I've had more time than most people get. Margaret pulled the forged contract closer. But I'm not spending what's left watching Richard Hayes steal everything I built. What do we need to stop him? More evidence. The shell company transactions are suspicious but technically legal if the board approve them. We need proof that Richard created the companies himself, or that he's receiving kickbacks, or that he forged board approval documents. Sam paused. Or we need someone willing to testify that he admitted to the scheme. Who would testify against Richard? He spent years building loyalty with the executive team. Then we find someone outside the executive team, someone Richard underestimated. Sam started packing up the documents. Someone he talked to without being careful because he didn't think they mattered. Margaret thought about that. About Richard's arrogance. About the way he dismissed anyone who wasn't C-suite level. I need to go to the office, she said suddenly. Margaret, you can barely stand up. I need to go to the office, she repeated. Not to a meeting, not to confront Richard. I need to talk to people he wouldn't have been careful around. Assistants, junior analysts, the people who hear things because nobody thinks they're listening. Sam looked skeptical. You think someone's going to confess to helping Richard commit fraud? No, but I think someone might remember something they didn't know was important. A phone call Richard took in a conference room, a document he printed but forgot to pick up, a conversation he had in the elevator. Margaret tried to stand, failed on the first attempt, succeeded on the second. Richard's smart, but he's also been getting away with this for months. People who don't expect to get caught make mistakes. And if you collapse in the office, if Richard sees you like this, then he sees me. Let him think I'm dying. Let him think he's already won. Margaret steadied herself against the table. Sometimes the best weapon is being underestimated. Sam studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded and pulled out his phone. I'll have my car brought around. And Margaret, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. I'm coming with you. If you're going to interrogate employees, you need counsel present anyway. Fine. But Sam, we need to be careful. If Richard finds out what we're looking for, he'll destroy evidence, I know. Sam closed both briefcases. Which is why we're not looking for evidence today. We're just a dying CEO making peace with her legacy, and her lawyer indulging her. Margaret managed a thin smile. When did you get so devious? I learned from the best. The ride to Stone Enterprises headquarters took 20 minutes. Margaret spent most of it with her eyes closed, trying to conserve energy and ignore the nausea that rolled through her in waves. She'd taken extra pain medication that morning, which helped with the physical discomfort, but made everything feel distant and slightly unreal. The building rose 40 stories above Midtown, all glass and steel, with the Stone Enterprises logo prominently displayed at the top. Margaret had designed that logo herself 30 years ago, sketching it on a napkin during a lunch meeting with her first major investor. Now, she might lose it all to a man who'd never built anything in his life. The car pulled into the underground garage. Margaret waited while Sam came around to help her out, hating that she needed the assistance, but grateful for it anyway. The elevator ride to the 38th floor felt interminable. When the doors opened, the reception area went silent. Margaret could see the shock on faces employees who hadn't seen her in months, who'd heard rumors about her health, but hadn't quite believed them. Now here she was, 40 pounds lighter, moving like each step cost her something, looking every bit as sick as the rumors suggested. Richard's assistant, Jennifer Blake, stood up from her desk so quickly her chair rolled backward. Ms. Stone, we didn't know you were coming in today. Should I notify Mr. Hayes? No. Margaret's voice came out stronger than she felt. I'm not here for meetings. Just wanted to see the office again. Check on a few things. Jennifer's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that looked like relief. Or maybe pity. Margaret couldn't tell which. Of course. Can I get you anything? Coffee, water? Water would be good. Thank you, Jennifer. Margaret moved slowly toward her office, Sam following a respectful step behind. Her office was exactly as she'd left it. Someone had been watering the plants. The awards and photos on the walls looked freshly dusted. Her desk was clear except for a single folder marked, "Urgent, requires CEO approval." Margaret picked it up. Inside were 3 contracts for asset sales, all requiring her signature, all selling Stone Enterprises properties to companies she'd never heard of at prices that seemed suspiciously low, all pre-approved by Richard Hayes' CFO according to the documentation. "Sam," she said quietly. He was already pulling out his phone photographing each page. Jennifer returned with water. Margaret noticed the younger woman's hands were shaking slightly as she set down the glass. "Jennifer, how long have you been Richard's assistant?" 3 years, Ms. Stone. You're good at your job. Efficient. Observant." Margaret took a sip of water. "I imagine you hear a lot of things working so close to the C-suite." Jennifer's expression became carefully neutral. "I maintain strict confidentiality regarding executive communications." "Of course. I wouldn't expect anything less." Margaret set down the glass. "I'm not asking you to violate confidentiality. I'm just curious. Has Richard seemed stressed lately? More phone calls than usual. Meetings with people outside the company." A pause. Then, "Mr. Hayes has been working extended hours for several months. He's mentioned that managing operations during your absence has been challenging." "I'm sure it has been." Margaret kept her tone casual. "Anyone particular he's been meeting with?" Another pause longer this time. Jennifer's eyes flicked toward Sam, then back to Margaret. "Ms. Stone, are you asking me as my CEO or as someone who wants to understand what's been happening in her absence?" Margaret finished gently. "And who appreciates employees who are observant and loyal." Jennifer bit her lip. Then very quietly, "Mr. Hayes has had multiple meetings with Marcus Chen from Meridian Corp., usually lunch or dinner off-site, but 3 weeks ago Mr. Chen came here. They met in the small conference room on this floor, the one without cameras." Margaret felt her pulse quicken. "Did you hear anything from that meeting?" "I brought them coffee. I knocked first." Jennifer twisted her hands together. "Mr. Hayes was showing Mr. Chen documents. I heard him say something about accelerating the timeline and having everything in place by end of quarter. When I came in, Mr. Hayes closed the folder quickly and asked me to hold all his calls." "Did you see what was in the folder?" "Just the top page. It had the Stone Enterprises logo, but I didn't recognize the format. It looked like a contract or agreement of some kind." She hesitated. "Ms. Stone, is something wrong? Should I be concerned?" Margaret exchanged a glance with Sam. Then she made a decision. "Jennifer, I need you to listen carefully. What I'm about to say doesn't leave this room. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am. I think Richard Hayes is stealing from this company. I think he's been selling assets without proper authorization and positioning himself to take over when I'm no longer able to fight back." Margaret kept her voice low and steady. "I need evidence. I need to know who he's working with, what he's planning, and when he's planning to make his move." Jennifer's face went pale. "Ms. Stone, I don't have access to his private files. Everything's password protected." "I'm not asking you to hack his computer. I'm asking you to pay attention, to remember things you've seen or heard, to maybe accidentally leave your desk when Richard has sensitive phone calls that he takes on speaker." Margaret leaned forward slightly. "I'm asking you to help me save this company, the company that employs 3,000 people, the company your job depends on. What if he finds out? What if he fires me? Then you'll have a job with me personally until this is resolved. And Jennifer..." Margaret held the younger woman's gaze. "When this is over, and it will be over one way or another, I'll make sure everyone knows who was loyal and who wasn't. The people who helped me will be taken care of. I promise you that." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Okay, I'll help. But Ms. Stone?" You should know there's someone else you should talk to. Definitely talk to David in accounting. David Kim. He's been asking questions about some of the transactions Mr. Hayes has been approving. Mr. Hayes shut him down, told him to stop being paranoid, but David's been keeping his own records. Margaret felt something loosen in her chest. Where can I find David? 34th floor, accounts payable. But Ms. Stone... Jennifer's voice dropped even lower. Mr. Hayes is on his way up right now. He got an alert that you entered the building. He'll be here in maybe 2 minutes. Then I should get to work. Margaret stood steadier than she'd been that morning. Thank you, Jennifer, for your loyalty and your courage. I should be thanking you. This job... Jennifer's voice cracked slightly. This job paid for my mom's nursing home when she had Alzheimer's. You didn't have to approve that. Your HR policy didn't cover it. But you did it anyway. You said family mattered more than policy. Margaret didn't remember that specifically. She'd made hundreds of similar decisions over the years, believing that a company's worth was measured by how it treated its people, not just its profits. Now, that belief might save everything. Go back to your desk, Margaret said gently. Act normal. And Jennifer, whatever you hear in the next few minutes, whatever Richard says to me, remember you're on the right side of this. Jennifer nodded and slipped out. Sam moved to stand beside Margaret. You just recruited a spy. I'm impressed. And slightly terrified. She's not a spy. She's an employee who knows her CEO is dying and wants to make sure the company survives. Margaret straightened her shoulders, preparing herself. Now let's see how good of an actor I am. The door opened without a knock. Richard Hayes strode in wearing a $1,500 suit and an expression of carefully calculated concern. Margaret? This is a surprise. When Jennifer said you were here, I could hardly believe it. He moved toward her with arms slightly extended as if considering whether to hug her. You should have called ahead. I would have cleared my schedule. No need. I'm just visiting. Wanted to see the office again. Margaret kept her voice weak, letting the exhaustion show. It's been too long. Richard's eyes swept over her, and she saw him catalog every sign of her deterioration. The weight loss, the pallor, the way she was gripping the edge of her desk for support. His concern deepened convincingly. Margaret, you shouldn't have come in. You should be resting, focusing on your health. We have everything under control here. I'm sure you do. Margaret gestured at the folder on her desk. These contracts, they need my signature, just routine asset management, nothing urgent. Richard moved smoothly to close the folder. I can handle these. You don't need to worry about operational details right now. But they're selling company properties, underperforming properties, dead weight. Richard's tone was patient, almost patronizing. Margaret, you know better than anyone that sometimes you have to trim the fat to stay competitive. These are smart moves. The board has already approved them. The whole board. The relevant committee members. Marcus Patricia David Singh. Everyone who needs to sign off on asset reallocation under $10 million per transaction. He smiled. It's all above board. You can trust me to protect the company's interests. Margaret let herself sway slightly. Sam moved to steady her. I'm sorry, she said. The medication makes it hard to focus sometimes. You're right. I should trust you. You've been carrying so much while I've been... She gestured vaguely at herself. You've been dealing with a terrible illness, Richard finished. And you should be home in bed letting yourself rest. Margaret, I have to say this as your friend and colleague coming in today pushing yourself like this. It's not helping anyone, least of all you. The word friend landed like a slap. Margaret had mentored Richard for 5 years, promoted him over more qualified candidates because he'd seemed hungry and brilliant and ambitious in ways that reminded her of her younger self. She'd trusted him with financial strategy, with board relationships, with the intimate details of how Stone Enterprises operated. And he'd been planning to steal it all along. You're right, she made herself say. I should go home. Sam, can you help me? Of course. Sam's hand was firm on her elbow. Mr. Hayes, we'll let you get back to work. Richard walked them to the elevator, still wearing his mask of concerned friendship. Margaret, truly, if there's anything I can do for you personally, please don't hesitate to ask. I know how difficult this must be. He pressed the button for the lobby. And please don't worry about the company. I'll take care of everything. The elevator doors closed on his sympathetic face. Margaret waited until they'd descended 3 floors before she spoke. Did you see his eyes when he looked at me? Yes, Sam said grimly. He thinks you're finished. He thinks he's already won. Good. Margaret's weakness fell away like a dropped mask. Then he won't see me coming. Sam, we need to find David Kim. Today. Right now. Margaret, you can barely stand. I'm fine. The weakness was an act. She met his eyes. Mostly. Sam, we don't have time. If Richard's planning to move at end of quarter, that's 3 weeks away. We need evidence now. The elevator stopped at the 34th floor. Margaret stepped out before Sam could argue further. The accounting department was a maze of cubicles and the soft sound of keyboards clicking. Margaret approached the nearest employee, a young woman with headphones on. Excuse me, I'm looking for David Kim. The woman looked up, did a visible double-take at seeing the CEO. Oh, Ms. Stone, he's in the back corner, by the window. Margaret found him hunched over a computer surrounded by what looked like months of printouts and sticky notes. David Kim. The young man spun around, nearly knocking over his coffee. He was maybe 30, with tired eyes and the slightly manic energy of someone who'd been obsessing over a problem. Ms. Stone. He stood quickly, then seemed unsure what to do with his hands. Nobody said you were coming in today. Nobody knew. Margaret pulled over a chair and sat before her legs could give out. David, I understand you've been asking questions about some of Richard Hayes's transactions. David's expression immediately became guarded. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. And I need you to tell me everything. Margaret kept her voice low. Because I think you've seen something that doesn't add up. I think you've been tracking irregularities. And I think Richard shut you down when you tried to raise concerns. David glanced around nervously. Ms. Stone, with all respect, I'm a junior analyst. I process payments. I don't make strategic decisions about what transactions are appropriate. But you know when something doesn't follow normal procedures. Even so, questioning the CFO's judgment isn't exactly... David. Margaret leaned forward. I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. I have maybe 3 months left. I didn't come here today to play politics or protect corporate hierarchy. I came here because I think Richard Hayes is stealing from my company, and I need someone who knows the numbers well enough to prove it. She paused. Jennifer Blake said you've been keeping your own records. Is that true? David's jaw tightened. He looked at Sam, then back to Margaret. If I show you what I have and I'm wrong, I'll be fired. If you're wrong, I'll apologize personally and give you a raise for due diligence, Margaret said. But David, you're not wrong, are you? A long silence. Then David reached under his desk and pulled out a locked file box. I started noticing problems 6 months ago, he said quietly, unlocking it. Small things. Payments to vendors we'd never used before. Purchase orders that didn't quite match the invoices. Nothing big enough to trigger automatic flags, but... He pulled out a thick folder. But when you put them all together, there's a pattern. He spread documents across his desk. Here. This company, Allied Consulting Services. We paid them $800,000 over 3 months for strategic advisory services. But when I tried to find out what services they'd actually provided, I couldn't get a straight answer. And when I looked up Allied Consulting, the company was only incorporated 2 weeks before we started paying them. Shell company, Sam said immediately. That's what I thought. So I started looking for similar patterns. David pulled out more documents. I found 17 companies we've paid in the last 6 months that were all incorporated within 30 days of their first invoice. Total payments across all of them, $4.7 million. Margaret felt her heart rate accelerate. 4.7 million. That's more than Sam found. Because Sam was probably looking at asset sales and major transactions, David said. These are buried in operational expenses, consulting fees, vendor payment, service contracts, all individually small enough not to require full board approval, just CFO sign-off. All signed off by Richard. Every single one. David pulled up a spreadsheet on his computer. And here's the interesting part. Every one of these shell companies was registered in Delaware by the same incorporation service. And every one of them has the same registered agent, a law firm called Hendricks & Associates. Sam was already typing on his phone. Hendricks & Associates specializes in corporate formations and offshore structures. They're known for creating complex entity networks. For people who want to hide money, Margaret said. Exactly. David's fingers flew across his keyboard. I couldn't access the ownership records, they're protected, but I did find one connection. Hendricks & Associates also registered the holding company that owns Richard Hayes's vacation home in the Hamptons. He bought it 2 years ago, but the property is held by something called Seabrook Holdings LLC. Which means Richard knows exactly how to create anonymous shell companies, Sam said. And he's using the same law firm to do it. Margaret looked at the evidence spread across David's desk. Individually, each piece might be explained away, but together they painted a damning picture. David, I need copies of everything you have. Every document, every spreadsheet, every suspicious transaction. She met his eyes. And I need you to testify to what you've found if this goes to court. Testify, Ms. Stone. I'm just an accountant. I process payments. Richard Hayes is the CFO, and he's got board members supporting him. Richard Hayes is a thief, Margaret said flatly. And you're the person who caught him. That takes courage and intelligence, David. Don't diminish that. It also might take my job. No. Margaret's voice was firm. It won't. Because when this is over, you'll be the senior analyst who saved Stone Enterprises from the biggest fraud in its history. You'll be the whistleblower who did the right thing when it was hard. You'll have your choice of positions here or anywhere else in the industry. She paused. But more importantly, you'll be able to look yourself in the mirror and know you didn't let a criminal steal from 3,000 employees who depend on this company for their livelihoods. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he started pulling USB drives from his drawer. I've been backing everything up for 2 months, he said. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew someone needed to see it eventually. He handed the drives to Sam. Everything's there. Invoices, payment records, incorporation documents for the shell company's email correspondence where I tried to get clarification on the services being provided. It's all organized by transaction and cross-referenced. You're meticulous, Sam said with genuine admiration. I'm Korean American, and I work in accounting, David said dryly. Meticulous is in my DNA. Also, I was scared Richard would delete everything if I raised too many red flags, so I wanted proof that couldn't be erased. Margaret stood slowly. David, you've done excellent work. More than excellent. This is exactly what we need. What happens now? Now Sam and I build a case. We take this evidence, combine it with what we already have, and we present it to the board in a way that's irrefutable. Margaret steadied herself against the desk. How much notice do you need before you can testify? To what? The board, the SEC, a jury. All of the above, potentially. David swallowed hard. Then I guess I need to talk to my wife. Tell her I might be making some powerful people very angry. You'll also be protecting your job and everyone else's, Margaret reminded him. And David. Whatever happens, I want you to know I'm grateful. People like you, people who see wrong and can't look away, that's what makes companies worth saving. She headed toward the elevator. Sam following with the USB drives clutched like treasure. In the elevator, Sam said, "You just promised him protection and a promotion. You're dying, Margaret. How can you guarantee any of that?" "Because I'm going to put it in writing before I die," Margaret said. David Kim gets promoted to Director of Financial Compliance, reporting directly to whoever becomes CEO. That goes into my final CEO directive, which the board has to honor as part of corporate governance. They could challenge it. Let them try. I'm a dying woman making sure a whistleblower is protected. Any board that overrules that will have the worst PR nightmare of their lives. Margaret leaned against the elevator wall, suddenly exhausted. "Sam, we have what we need now. We have evidence. We have a witness. We have a pattern of fraud. How long to build the case? If I work around the clock, maybe a week. We need to verify the shell company connections, confirm that the registered agent links back to Richard, establish timeline and intent." Sam looked at her carefully. "Margaret, are you going to make it through a week of this? Today alone has probably taken years off your life." "I don't have years to give," Margaret said. "I have weeks, maybe days if I push too hard. But Sam..." Her voice cracked slightly. "I can't let him win. I can't spend the last days of my life watching Richard Hayes destroy everything I built. Even if it kills me to stop him, at least I'll die knowing I tried." The elevator reached the lobby. Sam's car was waiting. As they drove back to Margaret's apartment, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Ms. Stone, this is Jennifer. Richard just called a meeting with the executive team for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Subject line, Leadership Transition Planning. I think he's making his move." Margaret showed the text to Sam. "Tomorrow," he said. "We don't have a week. We have hours. Then we work through the night." Margaret closed her eyes against a wave of nausea and pain. "Call whoever you need to call. Hire whatever help you need. I want a complete presentation ready by tomorrow at noon. Evidence documentation, legal analysis, everything." "Margaret?" "Sam, I'm going to die anyway. I'd rather die fighting than surrender." She opened her eyes. "And I really, really want to see Richard's face when he realizes he lost." Sam nodded once. Then he pulled out his phone and started making calls. Margaret leaned back against the seat and thought about Emma's drawing. The purple cape. Superheroes didn't give up just because the odds were bad. They showed up. They fought. They stayed. Even when staying hurt. Especially then. Margaret's apartment became a war room by 8 p.m. Sam had brought in 2 associate attorneys and a forensic accountant, all sworn to confidentiality. They'd taken over her dining table, spreading documents and laptops across every available surface. The sound of keyboards clicking mixed with low voices comparing transaction dates and corporate filings. Margaret sat in her armchair, a blanket across her lap, despite the warmth, watching them work. The pain medication made everything slightly fuzzy around the edges, but she'd refused to take the higher dose her doctor prescribed. She needed to stay sharp. Needed to understand every piece of evidence they were building. Her phone buzzed. Daniel Torres. "Emma wants to know if you're eating the soup. She's worried because I told her you went to work today, and she says sick people shouldn't go to work, they should rest and eat soup." Despite everything, Margaret smiled. She typed back, "Tell Emma I ate some for lunch. It helped. And tell her I'm being careful." The response came quickly. "She says being careful means listening to your body. She's 8 going on 80, I swear." Margaret set the phone down and watched Sam pull up another spreadsheet, his expression darkening as he cross-referenced numbers. "The Hendricks and Associates connection is solid," he said without looking up. "Every shell company traces back to them. And get this, they build Stone Enterprises directly for incorporation services. Richard literally used company funds to create the entities he's using to steal from the company." "That's arrogant," one of the associates said. "That's stupid," Sam corrected. "Arrogance makes you sloppy." He got comfortable, started taking shortcuts. The forensic accountant, a woman named Lisa Chen, held up a printed document. I found something else. 3 of the shell companies made payments to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The account is held by another company, Seabrook Holdings. That's Richard's company, Margaret said. The one that owns his vacation home. Exactly. So we can trace the money directly from Stone Enterprises to shell companies to Richard's personal offshore account. That's not just embezzlement anymore. That's wire fraud, money laundering, and about 6 other federal charges. Lisa's smile was sharp. The FBI would love this. Sam looked at Margaret. If we involve federal authorities, this becomes a criminal investigation. Are you prepared for that? It'll be public. Messy. The media will have a field day. Richard was prepared to steal my company while I was dying, Margaret said quietly. I'm prepared to watch him go to prison. Contact the FBI. But Sam, I want to confront him first. Tomorrow before the meeting. I want him to know I caught him. That's a bad idea. If he has any warning, he'll start destroying evidence. He won't have time. The meeting's at 2 p.m. We show him what we have at 1:30. Give him 30 minutes to realize he's finished. Then we walk into that boardroom, and I present everything to the full board. Margaret's voice was steady, despite the tremor in her hands. I want Richard to sit through that meeting knowing what's coming. I want him to feel the walls closing in. That's vindictive. That's justice. He was planning to watch me die while stealing everything I built. The least I can do is return the favor. Margaret closed her eyes briefly. Make it happen, Sam. I want documentation so airtight that Richard can't breathe, let alone wriggle out. They worked through the night. Margaret dozed intermittently in her chair, waking to ask questions or review sections of the presentation. Around 3 a.m. she made coffee for everyone despite Sam's protest that she should be resting. I'll rest when I'm dead, she said, and the words hung in the air with uncomfortable truth. By dawn, they had it. A 90-page presentation with exhibits, financial trails, corporate documents, and testimony from David Kim. Everything cross-referenced, verified, and legally bulletproof. Sam printed multiple copies, while Lisa created a digital backup and sent encrypted versions to 3 separate secure servers. If Richard tries to make this disappear, he can't, Lisa said. The evidence exists in too many places now. Margaret held the bound presentation in her hands. It was heavy, substantial. Proof that she'd fought back. Good, she said. Now everyone go home. Get a few hours of sleep. We reconvene at noon to do a final run-through. After they left, Margaret sat alone in her apartment as sunrise painted the windows gold. She should sleep. Should conserve energy for what was coming. Instead, she opened her laptop and wrote an email. To the Board of Directors of Stone Enterprises. If you're reading this, it means I didn't survive long enough to deliver this message in person. By now, you'll have received the evidence of Richard Hayes' systematic fraud and embezzlement. You'll have seen the financial documentation, the shell company structures, and the witness testimony. I'm writing this to make my wishes clear. Richard Hayes must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. No settlements, no quiet resignations, no allowing him to save face or preserve his reputation. I also want to make clear that David Kim, Jennifer Blake, and several others acted with courage and integrity to expose this fraud. They should be protected, promoted, and publicly recognized for their loyalty to this company and its employees. Finally, I want to name my successor as CEO, Sarah Mitchell, currently our VP of Operations. She's brilliant, ethical, and has been with Stone Enterprises for 15 years. She knows how to build rather than destroy. She'll lead this company into the future I won't live to see. If the board refuses to honor these wishes, I've instructed my attorney to make all evidence public along with this letter. The court of public opinion can be very effective when the legal system fails. I built Stone Enterprises with my own hands, my own sweat, and my own stubborn refusal to accept that a woman couldn't compete with men in construction and development. I'm not letting a mediocre man with nice hair and expensive suits tear down what took me 3 decades to build. Do the right thing. Margaret Stone. She saved it as a draft and copied Sam on it with instructions to send it only if something happened to her before the board meeting. Then she finally let herself sleep, still sitting in her chair, wrapped in a blanket, with Emma's purple cape drawing visible on the table beside her. Her phone woke her at noon. Sam. We're on our way over. How are you feeling? Margaret assessed herself honestly. Terrible. The pain was worse today, probably from yesterday's exertion. Her hands shook badly enough that holding a coffee cup would be difficult. And the nausea was constant now, rolling through her in waves. I'm fine, she said. I'll be ready. Sam's silence suggested he didn't believe her, but he didn't argue. See you in 30 minutes. Margaret forced herself to shower and dress. She chose her power suit, the navy Tom Ford she'd worn for her last major acquisition. It hung loose on her now, but it still meant something. It was armor, a reminder of who she'd been before the cancer, who she still was underneath the dying. She was applying makeup when her doorbell rang. Too early for Sam. Margaret opened the door to find Daniel Torres standing there with Emma beside him. Mr. Torres, Emma, this is unexpected. I know. I'm sorry. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Emma insisted. She heard me on the phone this morning telling my sister about you going back to work, and she decided you needed soup before your big meeting. Emma held up a container with both hands, her expression solemn. Daddy says you have to fight bad guys today. Superheroes need fuel. That's what Mommy always said. You can't save people on an empty stomach. Margaret knelt down slowly, bringing herself to Emma's eye level. The movement sent pain shooting through her abdomen, but she ignored it. You made me more soup. Special soup. I put extra stars in it. And I prayed over it like Mommy used to do. Prayed that it would help you be strong today. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. Daddy says you're really sick, but I think if you eat enough soup and believe hard enough, maybe you can stay long enough to win. Margaret's throat tightened. Emma, sweetheart, sometimes people are too sick for soup to fix. Sometimes, I know people die. Mommy died. Emma's eyes were too wise for 8 years old. But she fought really hard first. And Daddy says fighting matters even if you don't win, because it shows other people how to be brave. She pushed the soup toward Margaret. So you have to eat the soup and fight really hard, okay? Even if you're scared. Margaret took the container with trembling hands. I'm very scared. That's okay. Daddy's scared every day. But he still shows up for me. And I think you still show up for your people too. Emma reached out and touched Margaret's hand. That's what makes you a superhero. Not the winning, the showing up. Daniel's eyes were suspiciously bright. Emma, we should let Ms. Stone get ready for her meeting. Wait. Margaret stood steadying herself against the doorframe. Daniel, would you do me a favor? My attorney will be here in 20 minutes with his team. We're going to Stone Enterprises to confront someone who's been stealing from my company. I'd like you to come with us. Daniel blinked. Ma'am, I'm a building maintenance worker. I don't know anything about corporate fraud. I don't need an expert. I need a witness. Someone outside the company who can testify that they saw me in sound mind, present evidence to the board. Someone who can't be accused of having a stake in the outcome. She paused. And honestly, I need someone who reminds me why I'm doing this. You and Emma, you've shown up for me when you had no reason to. When everyone else who should have cared was nowhere to be found. I'd like you there when I show up for my people. Daniel looked at Emma, then back to Margaret. I'd have to call my sister. She watches Emma on Fridays, but I can watch her here, Margaret heard herself say. My housekeeper comes at 1 p.m. She's worked for me for 10 years. She'll keep Emma safe until you get back. Ms. Stone, you'll be at your meeting. The meeting starts at 2. We're confronting Richard at 1:30. I'll be back by 4 at the latest. Margaret met his eyes. Please, Daniel, I'm asking you to stay. One more time. Emma tugged on her father's sleeve. Daddy, you should go. She needs someone to stay with her. That's what we do. We stay. Daniel's resistance crumbled visibly. Okay, yeah, I'll come. But Emma stays here where it's safe, and someone responsible watches her. Done. Margaret opened the door wider. "Come in. My attorney will be here soon. Fair warning, today is going to be intense." Sam arrived 15 minutes later with Lisa and one of the associates. He did a double take when he saw Daniel sitting on Margaret's couch. "Margaret, who?" "This is Daniel Torres. He's coming with us as an independent witness." Margaret's tone brooked no argument. "Daniel, this is Samuel Rodriguez, my attorney. Sam Daniel is the man I told you about, the one who brought me soup." Sam's expression suggested he had many questions, but recognized this wasn't the time. "Mr. Torres, good to meet you. Do you understand what you're witnessing today?" "Ms. Stone is confronting someone who stole from her company. She wants me there to verify what happens." Daniel's voice was steady. "I understand." "And you're willing to testify to that if needed?" "I am." Sam nodded slowly. "All right then. Welcome to the team." He turned to Margaret. "Are you ready for this? Really ready? Because once we walk in there and show Richard what we have, there's no taking it back." Margaret thought about the forum she'd visited 6 weeks ago, the cryptocurrency transfer she'd almost made, the professional who would have shown up at 8 p.m. to make it fast. She thought about Emma's soup and purple capes, and the way Daniel had refused to pretend he didn't see her drowning. She thought about David Kim keeping meticulous records because he couldn't look away from wrong. About Jennifer Blake remembering meetings and taking risks to help. She thought about 3,000 employees who depended on Stone Enterprises for their livelihoods, who had no idea their jobs were being gambled away by a man in an expensive suit. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's go end this." The car ride to Stone Enterprises took 25 minutes. Margaret sat in the back with Sam reviewing the presentation one final time, while Lisa called ahead to Jennifer to confirm Richard was in his office. "He's there," Lisa reported. "Jennifer says he's been in meetings all morning with Marcus Chen. They're going over the leadership transition proposal for the 2 p.m. board meeting." "Perfect," Margaret said. "He'll be confident, unprepared." They arrived at 1:15. The elevator ride to the 38th floor felt longer than yesterday, but Margaret refused to let herself show weakness. Not now, not when everything depended on her staying strong for 30 more minutes. Jennifer met them outside the elevator, her face pale but determined. "He's in his office. Mr. Chen left 10 minutes ago. Richard's alone right now." "Good." Margaret straightened her shoulders. "Jennifer, I need you to do something. At exactly 1:45, I need you to call security and have them stationed outside Richard's office. Tell them the CEO has requested their presence for a sensitive matter. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am. Ms. Stone." Jennifer's voice wavered. "Thank you for doing this, for caring enough to fight. Thank you for being brave enough to help." Margaret touched Jennifer's shoulder briefly, then walked toward Richard's office. Sam fell into step beside her carrying the bound presentation. Daniel followed quietly, looking out of place in his work clothes among the suits and corporate polish. Margaret didn't knock. She opened Richard's door and walked in like she owned the place, because she did. Richard looked up from his laptop, and for just a moment, genuine surprise crossed his face, before the mask of concern slid back into place. "Margaret, I didn't know you were coming in again today. You really should be resting before the board meeting." "Sit down, Richard." Something in her tone made him stop talking. Margaret walked to his desk and set down the bound presentation with a heavy thud. "What's this?" Richard asked, but his eyes had already gone wary. "That's documentation of every fraudulent transaction you've authorized over the past 6 months. Every shell company you created. Every asset you sold to Meridian Corp at below market value. Every payment you made to yourself through offshore accounts." Margaret's voice was ice. "It's over, Richard. I know everything." Richard's face went carefully blank. "Margaret, I don't know what you think you found, but—" "Hendricks and Associates," Sam said, stepping forward. "The law firm you used to incorporate Seabrook Holdings, the same law firm that created Allied Consulting Services, Trident Solutions, and 15 other shell companies, that Stone Enterprises has paid $4.7 million in the past 6 months. He opened the presentation. You used company funds to create the entities you're using to steal from the company. That's traceable, Richard. And it's federal wire fraud. Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. This is absurd. These are legitimate business expenses. That all funnel money back to your offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Lisa interrupted. We've traced every transaction. Your signature is on every authorization. Your law firm created every shell entity. Your bank account received the ultimate proceeds. She smiled coldly. You got sloppy, Mr. Hayes. You got comfortable. You can't prove. We have your email correspondence with Marcus Chen discussing the timeline for your takeover. Sam continued. We have testimony from Jennifer Blake about meetings you held in rooms without cameras. We have David Kim's meticulous documentation of every suspicious transaction. We have corporate records showing you forged board approval on multiple asset sales. Sam pulled out another document. And we have this, a pre-signed contract selling Stone Enterprises' patent portfolio to Meridian Corp. With Margaret's forged signature. That's not just fraud, Richard. That's criminal conspiracy. Richard stood slowly, his hands pressed flat against his desk. You can't take this to the board. Margaret, you're dying. You're medicated. Your judgment is impaired. No one will believe. Federal prosecutors will believe it, Margaret said quietly. The FBI will believe it. The Securities and Exchange Commission will believe it, and by 3 p.m. today, every board member will have copies of this documentation along with instructions to cooperate with federal investigators. You wouldn't. The scandal would destroy the company. You destroyed the company. Margaret's voice rose for the first time. You stole from 3,000 employees. You sold assets that provided jobs and livelihoods. You planned to watch me die so you could sweep in and take credit for rebuilding what you intentionally broke. You did this, Richard. I'm just making sure you pay for it. Richard's mask finally cracked. I built this company as much as you did. I've worked here for 8 years. 8 years of making you look good, covering for your mistakes, keeping operations running while you played visionary. His voice turned ugly. You were going to die without naming a successor. The board was panicking. I stepped up. I did what needed to be done. You stole. That's what you did. You stole and you lied and you betrayed everyone who trusted you. Margaret leaned forward despite the pain radiating through her abdomen. And now you're going to prison for it. You can't prove intent. Any halfway decent attorney will argue I was trying to protect company assets during a leadership crisis. Then explain Seabrook Holdings, Sam said. Explain why company money ended up in your personal offshore account. Explain the forged signatures. Explain the secret meetings with Marcus Chen where you discussed selling Stone Enterprises piece by piece. Richard's face had gone pale. Who told you about the meetings with Chen? Does it matter? Margaret smiled without humor. You assumed no one was paying attention. You assumed I was too sick to fight back. You assumed you'd won before the game was over. She picked up the presentation. You assumed wrong. A knock on the door. Jennifer's voice. Mr. Hayes' security is here. Ms. Stone requested their presence. Richard's eyes darted to the door, then back to Margaret. What are you doing? Protecting my company. Protecting my employees. Protecting everything you tried to destroy. Margaret moved toward the door. You're not coming to the board meeting, Richard. You're not making your leadership transition proposal. You're sitting here in this office with security outside until the FBI arrives to take your statement. You can't do this. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, Sam said. I suggest you exercise it. Anything you say right now can and will be used against you. As of this moment, you're under investigation for federal wire fraud, money laundering, forgery, and embezzlement. Your assets have been frozen. Your passport has been flagged. And your attorney is going to earn every penny you pay him. Margaret opened the door. 2 security guards stood outside with Jennifer. Gentlemen, Mr. Hayes is not to leave this office until federal authorities arrive. He's not to access his computer, his phone, or any company files. Is that clear? Yes, Ms. Stone. Richard stood behind his desk, looking smaller somehow. Diminished. Margaret, wait. We can work this out. We can't. Margaret's voice was tired now, the adrenaline draining away. You made your choices, Richard. You chose to steal. You chose to betray. You chose to prey on a dying woman's vulnerability. She paused in the doorway. I'm choosing to fight back. That's the only choice I have left. She walked away without looking back. In the elevator, Daniel spoke for the first time since they'd entered the building. Is he really going to prison? If I have anything to say about it, yes, Sam said. The evidence is overwhelming. Federal prosecutors love cases this clean. Good, Daniel said quietly. My wife used to say that sometimes the only thing you can do about evil is name it and refuse to let it win. He looked at Margaret. You named it. Now you've got to make sure it doesn't win. That's what the board meeting is for. Margaret leaned against the elevator wall, suddenly exhausted. That's where we make sure Richard's plan dies completely. The elevator doors opened on the 40th floor, the executive boardroom level. Margaret stepped out and took a deep breath. One more fight. One more hour of staying strong. Then she could rest. Maybe forever. But at least she'd die knowing she'd showed up when it mattered. The boardroom doors loomed ahead. Behind them, 10 board members were gathering, expecting Richard to present his leadership transition plan. Instead, Margaret Stone was about to show them exactly what kind of leadership they'd almost let destroy everything. She pushed open the doors and walked in. And the real battle began. The boardroom fell silent when Margaret entered. 10 faces turned toward her with expressions ranging from shock to poorly concealed dismay. Marcus Chen actually half rose from his seat before catching himself. Patricia Wolf's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. David Singh's eyes went wide. They'd been expecting Richard. They'd been preparing to discuss leadership transitions while Margaret was safely dying at home, out of sight and out of mind. Instead, she stood in the doorway, looking like death itself had taken human form, and decided to crash their party. Margaret. Marcus found his voice first smooth as always. This is unexpected. We weren't told you'd be attending today's meeting. That's because I didn't tell you. Margaret moved to her seat at the head of the table, the CEO's chair that Richard had probably been planning to occupy within the month. Sam, Lisa, and Daniel followed her in taking positions along the wall. I apologize for the surprise, but circumstances required discretion. Circumstances? Patricia set down her cup. Margaret, dear, you should be resting. We all understand how difficult this time must be. Do you understand? Margaret interrupted. Do you understand that while I've been dying, someone's been systematically dismantling everything I built? Do you understand that this company has been hemorrhaging money for 6 months and nobody thought to question it? The board members exchanged glances. If you're referring to the operational adjustments Richard has been implementing, Marcus said carefully, the board approved those measures. They were necessary cost-cutting protocols during a time of uncertainty. They were fraud. Margaret nodded to Sam, who began distributing the bound presentations. What you're receiving now is documentation of every illegal transaction Richard Hayes has authorized in the past 6 months. Shell companies, forged signatures, embezzled funds, asset sales to Meridian Corp at below market value. $4.7 million stolen from Stone Enterprises and funneled into Richard's personal offshore accounts. Marcus's presentation hit the table with a thud that sounded too loud in the sudden silence. That's a serious accusation, David Singh said slowly. Margaret, are you certain Richard has been? I'm certain. The evidence is irrefutable. Page 12 shows the shell company structure. Page 28 traces the money to Richard's Cayman Islands account. Page 46 contains testimony from our senior accountant documenting every suspicious transaction. Margaret's voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. Sam, would you walk them through the highlights? Sam moved to the presentation screen, pulling up the first slide. Allied Consulting Services, incorporated February 14th by Hendricks & Associates, the same law firm Richard uses for his personal holdings. Stone Enterprises paid them $800,000 for strategic advisory services that were never actually provided. Next slide. Trident Solutions, incorporated March 3rd, also by Hendricks & Associates. We paid them $650,000 for vendor management that didn't exist. Another slide. I can show you 15 more just like these, all incorporated by the same firm, all paid by Stone Enterprises, all ultimately funneling money to Seabrook Holdings, Richard's personal company. Patricia flipped through her presentation, her face growing paler with each page. This can't be right. We approved those vendor contracts. Richard presented them as cost-saving measures. Richard presented forged board approval documents, Lisa said from her position by the wall. Page 62 shows the real board minutes from those meetings. None of these contracts were actually approved. Richard used his CFO authority to authorize payments under $10 million, the threshold that doesn't require full board vote, and then falsified documentation to make it look legitimate. Marcus was speed-reading his copy, his expression darkening. The Meridian contracts. These asset sales to my company. Are you accusing me of being part of this? That depends, Margaret said. Were you knowingly purchasing stolen assets, or did Richard misrepresent his authority to sell them? He told me you'd approved the sales. He showed me documentation with your signature. Forged. Page 71 shows the real documents. My signature was copied from other contracts and pasted onto these. Margaret leaned forward. Marcus, you've known me for 20 years. We've competed, we've cooperated, we've respected each other. Did you really think I'd sell my patent portfolio for $60 million when it's worth over $200? Marcus closed his eyes briefly. No, I didn't think that. But Richard said you were incapacitated. He said the board had authorized him to make emergency decisions to stabilize the company. The board authorized nothing of the kind. David Singh interrupted, flipping pages rapidly. These transactions weren't in any board minutes. I review every approval document. These were never presented to us. Because if they had been, you would have questioned them, Sam said. Richard was counting on the fact that as CFO, he had authority for smaller transactions. He kept each theft under the reporting threshold, spread them out over months, buried them in operational expenses. It was sophisticated, it was systematic, and it would have worked if one accountant hadn't been paying attention. David Kim, Margaret said, junior analyst in accounts payable. He noticed irregularities and started keeping his own records. When he tried to raise concerns, Richard shut him down. But David kept documenting anyway. She paused. Because some people can't look away from wrong even when it's dangerous. Patricia had tears in her eyes now, whether from anger or shock, Margaret couldn't tell. How much did he steal in total? That we can prove $4.7 million, but we believe it's more. We believe Richard was planning to continue the scheme while simultaneously devaluing the company to make it vulnerable for acquisition. Margaret pulled out another document. This is a contract Richard was planning to present today as part of his leadership transition proposal. It would have given him emergency executive powers, authorized him to make unilateral decisions on all transactions under $50 million, and removed board oversight for 90 days while we stabilized operations. That's a corporate coup, Marcus said flatly. That would have given him absolute control. Which is exactly what he wanted. With me dying and the board desperate for stability, you might have approved it just to feel like someone competent was in charge. Margaret's voice hardened. And by the time you realized what he'd done, the company would have been gutted and sold for parts. The boardroom erupted into overlapping voices. Board members shouting questions, demanding clarification, expressing outrage. Marcus was on his phone, presumably calling his own attorneys. Patricia was crying openly now. David Singh looked like he might be sick. Margaret let it continue for 30 seconds. Then she stood, and something about that simple action, the visible effort it took, the way she had to grip the table for support, cut through the chaos. Everyone stopped talking. "I'm dying," Margaret said into the silence. "You all know that. Some of you have known for months. Most of you were probably relieved when I stopped coming to meetings, stopped responding to emails, stopped being a problem you had to deal with. Margaret," Patricia started. "Let me finish. I don't have much time, and I need you to understand something." Margaret's grip on the table tightened. "I could have died quietly. I could have let Richard take over, let him destroy this company, let 3,000 employees lose their jobs to line his pockets. It would have been easier. God knows dying is hard enough without adding corporate warfare to it." She looked at each board member in turn. "But I didn't build Stone Enterprises to watch a mediocre man with good hair steal it. I didn't spend 30 years fighting for respect, for contracts, for every inch of success just to surrender at the end because I'm tired and sick and ready to be done." Her voice cracked slightly. "I built this company because I believed a woman could do what men said was impossible. I believed that hard work and intelligence mattered more than connections and charm. I believed that how you treat people, how you treat the junior accountants and assistants and maintenance workers, that's what defines whether you deserve success." Daniel shifted against the wall, and Margaret saw him out of the corner of her eye. 3 weeks ago, I was ready to die. I'd given up. I thought nothing I'd built mattered because I wouldn't be here to protect it. She released the table and stood unsupported despite the pain. Then someone showed up with soup his 8-year-old daughter made. Someone who had every reason to mind his own business decided that a dying stranger was worth staying for. Margaret pulled Emma's drawing from her jacket pocket and set it on the table. The purple cape looked absurdly bright against the corporate documents. "That's what his daughter drew. She thinks I'm a superhero because I'm fighting even though I'm sick. She doesn't understand corporate fraud or billion-dollar companies or any of this." Margaret gestured at the presentations. "She just understands that when someone's in trouble, you show up. You make soup. You stay." Patricia wiped her eyes. Marcus had set down his phone. "I'm showing up today because that's what leaders do. We show up when it's hard. We fight when fighting costs us something. We protect the people who depend on us, even when we're barely standing." Margaret sat down slowly. "And I expect every person in this room to do the same. This company employs 3,000 people. Those people have families, mortgages, children, in college, medical bills, dreams. They show up every day trusting that we'll do our jobs with integrity." She tapped the presentation in front of her. "Richard Hayes violated that trust. He stole from them. He gambled with their livelihoods. And I expect this board to hold him accountable, not just because it's legally required, because it's right." Silence settled over the room again, but different this time. Heavier. More purposeful. Finally, Patricia spoke. "What do you need from us, Margaret?" "I need you to vote unanimously to remove Richard as CFO, effective immediately. I need you to cooperate fully with federal investigators. I need you to approve enhanced financial oversight protocols, so this never happens again." Margaret paused. "And I need you to approve my successor." "Successor?" David Singh leaned forward. "You're naming someone today, Sarah Mitchell, VP of Operations. She's been with Stone Enterprises for 15 years. She's brilliant, ethical, and ready." Margaret pulled out another document. "She knows how to build. She understands that companies are made of people, not just profit margins, and she'll lead Stone Enterprises forward after I'm gone." Marcus studied the document. "This is effective immediately. I'll remain as CEO until I'm physically unable to continue. But Sarah assumes all operational authority today. She'll transition to CEO when I—" Margaret's voice faltered for the first time. "When I can't do the job anymore." "That could be weeks," Patricia said gently. "Margaret, are you sure you want to spend your last weeks fighting?" "I'm not fighting, I'm finishing." Margaret managed a thin smile. There's a difference. Fighting is what you do when you're not sure you'll win. Finishing is what you do when you know the ending is coming and you want to control how the story ends. She looked around the table again. I'm finishing my story by making sure Richard faces consequences, by protecting the employees who depend on this company, by leaving behind something stronger than what I found. She paused. That's not fighting, that's legacy. David Singh was the first to raise his hand. I vote yes. Remove Richard, approve. Sarah, implement new oversight. All of it. Patricia raised her hand second. Yes, I vote yes. One by one hands went up around the table. Marcus was last. He sat there looking at Margaret, and something complicated moved across his face. You could have destroyed me too, he said quietly. The Meridian contracts, they make me look complicit, even if I didn't know. You could have used this to take down a competitor. But I didn't. Because you were a victim of Richard's fraud, not a perpetrator. Margaret met his eyes. We've been competitors for 20 years, Marcus. We've both won and lost against each other. But we've always been honest. I wasn't going to let Richard's crimes destroy your reputation, too. Marcus nodded slowly. Then he raised his hand. Yes, I vote yes on all measures. And Margaret. His voice was rough. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have questioned those contracts more carefully. I should have verified. You trusted someone you thought was trustworthy. That's not a character flaw. Margaret's exhaustion was showing now, her words coming slower. But Marcus, I need you to do something for me. I need you to return the assets Richard sold you. Pay fair market value, not the fraud price. Make Stone Enterprises whole. That's going to cost Meridian over $100 million. I know, but it's the right thing to do, and it'll save you when the federal investigation widens. Margaret leaned back in her chair. Help me fix what Richard broke. Please. Marcus closed his presentation and stood. He walked to Margaret's end of the table and extended his hand. We have a deal. I'll have my attorneys draw up the contracts today. Fair market value, full restitution. He shook her hand firmly. And Margaret, thank you for not burning me when you could have. That took integrity I'm not sure I would have had in your position. Then work on that, Margaret said, because that's what separates us from men like Richard. We choose integrity even when it costs us. Sam cleared his throat. If we're done with the board vote, I need to inform you that FBI agents will be here within the hour to interview Richard and take custody of evidence. They'll want statements from board members over the next few days. We'll cooperate fully, David Singh said. The other board members nodded agreement. Margaret tried to stand and couldn't quite manage it. Daniel moved forward instinctively, offering his arm. She took it gratefully. This meeting is adjourned, she said. Sam will coordinate with everyone on next steps. Patricia, can you contact Sarah and bring her up to speed? I want her in the CEO office by Monday. Of course. Patricia moved to Margaret's other side. Let me help you to your office. You need to rest. I need to go home. Margaret's voice was fading now, the adrenaline finally depleting. I need to lie down before I fall down. Sam was already calling for the car. Lisa gathered up the presentations. The board members filed out quietly, most of them looking shaken. Marcus lingered by the door. Margaret, your daughter who made that drawing, the one who thinks you're a superhero. She's right. She's not my daughter. She's his. Margaret nodded toward Daniel. But yes, she's very wise for 8 years old. Tell her thank you, for the soup, for reminding you to fight. Marcus smiled sadly. For reminding all of us what matters. Then he was gone, and Margaret let herself sag against Daniel's supporting arm. I need to get you home, Daniel said. You're about to collapse. Not yet. Not until we're out of this building. Margaret forced herself upright. I walked in here standing. I'm walking out the same way. They made it to the elevator before her legs gave out entirely. Daniel caught her, lowered her gently to sit on the elevator floor. So much for walking out standing. Margaret said and laughed weakly. Pride goeth before a fall. You made it farther than most people could have, Daniel said. Most people would never have made it here at all. The elevator descended. Sam and Lisa hovered anxiously. Margaret closed her eyes and focused on breathing through the pain. When the doors opened on the lobby building, security was waiting with a wheelchair. Margaret wanted to protest, but she didn't have the strength. She let them transfer her, let Daniel push the chair, let herself be weak for the first time since morning. The car ride home was a blur. She drifted in and out of consciousness, hearing Sam on the phone coordinating with the FBI, Lisa confirming that security was still stationed outside Richard's office. At her apartment building, Daniel lifted her out of the car like she weighed nothing. She probably didn't weigh much anymore. Cancer was efficient that way. Emma, she murmured. Your sister is watching, Emma. I know. My sister texted. Emma's fine. She ate all your good cookies and watched a movie with your housekeeper. Daniel carried her into the elevator. She wants to know if you won. Yes, we won. Good. She'll want to draw you a new cape. Maybe with stars this time. Margaret smiled against his shoulder. Stars would be nice. In her apartment, Daniel set her on the bed and started to leave. Stay, Margaret said. Please, just for a few minutes. I don't want to be alone right now. Daniel pulled up a chair and sat. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now, but people always go. They leave or they die or they disappoint you. Margaret's eyes were still closed. Everyone leaves eventually. Maybe, but not today. Today, I'm staying. Daniel's voice was gentle. Rest, Ms. Stone. You did what you needed to do. You can rest now. Margaret let herself sink into sleep, knowing that when she woke, the FBI would be questioning Richard, the board would be implementing new protocols, and Sarah would be preparing to take over a company that Margaret had saved one last time. She'd shown up, she'd fought, she'd stayed. Just like Emma said superheroes do, even when it hurt. Especially then. In her dreams, she was wearing a purple cape covered in stars, and she was flying. Margaret woke to voices in her living room. For a disoriented moment, she thought she'd dreamed everything. The board meeting, the confrontation with Richard, the evidence presentation. Maybe she was still lying in bed 6 weeks ago, waiting for the professional who'd never come. Then the pain reminded her it was all real. The cancer was real. The fight was real. And she'd won. The voices grew clearer. Daniel was talking to someone, his tone warm and patient. No, you can't wake her up yet. She's very sick and she needs rest. But I made her a new drawing, with stars like you said. Emma's voice insistent. And I brought more soup, the kind that helps you be strong after big fights. Margaret opened her eyes. The afternoon light through her windows had turned golden. She'd slept for 3 hours. You can leave the drawing and the soup, Daniel was saying. I'll make sure she gets them when she wakes up. I'm awake. Margaret's voice came out rough. She cleared her throat and tried again. Emma, is that you? Small footsteps rushed toward her bedroom. Emma appeared in the doorway, Daniel close behind, wearing an apologetic expression. I told her we should come back tomorrow, he said. But she insisted you'd want to know about the new cape. I do want to know. Margaret pushed herself up to sitting, trying not to wince at how much it hurt. Come here, sweetheart. Show me what you drew. Emma climbed onto the bed, carefully holding a piece of paper like it was precious. The drawing showed a stick figure with a purple cape, but this time the cape had gold stars scattered across it. Daddy said you won your fight with the bad guy, so I put stars on your cape because stars are what you get when you win, like gold stars in school. Emma's face was serious. Did you really beat him, the bad guy? Yes. We caught him stealing, and now he's going to face consequences for what he did. Good. Stealing is wrong. Even when you're hungry, Daddy says you don't steal. You ask for help instead. Emma traced one of the stars on the drawing. Was he sorry? Margaret thought about Richard's face when security had escorted him out. The FBI had taken him into custody an hour after the board meeting. Sam had texted her the update while she slept. "No," she said honestly. "I don't think he was sorry. I think he was angry that he got caught." "That's sad. Mommy used to say the saddest people are the ones who do bad things and don't feel sorry." Emma looked up at Margaret with those two wise eyes. "Do you feel sad about him?" "A little. I trusted him. I thought he was my friend. Finding out he wasn't that hurt almost as much as catching him." "That's because you have a good heart. People with good hearts hurt more when people are mean." Emma patted Margaret's hand. "But you still stopped him. Even though it hurt? That's what makes you brave." Daniel moved to the doorway. "Emma, we should let Ms. Stone rest now. You gave her the drawing." "Wait." Margaret held up a hand. "Daniel? When was the last time you ate? You've been with me all day." "I'm fine. I grabbed something from the vending machine at your office." "That's not food. That's chemicals and plastic." Margaret reached for her phone on the nightstand. "My housekeeper left dinner in the refrigerator. Enough for 6 people because she doesn't understand the concept of cooking for one. You and Emma should stay. Eat something real." Daniel hesitated. "Ms. Stone, you need rest, not house guests." "I need company. There's a difference." Margaret swung her legs over the side of the bed, moving carefully. "Besides, Emma brought me soup. The least I can do is feed you both an actual meal." "You shouldn't be cooking." "I'm not cooking, I'm reheating. Big difference." Margaret stood slowly, one hand braced against the nightstand. "Emma, do you like lasagna?" "I love lasagna. Daddy never makes it because he says it's too complicated." "It is complicated. That's why I pay someone else to make it." Margaret shuffled toward the kitchen, Daniel hovering nervously behind her. "Come on, let's eat something. Then you can tell me what happened after I left the office." Over reheated lasagna and salad, Daniel filled her in on the afternoon's developments. Richard had been arrested on multiple federal charges. Marcus Chen had already begun the process of returning the fraudulently purchased assets. The FBI had seized Richard's computers, phones, and financial records. "Jennifer said the whole office was buzzing," Daniel reported. "People couldn't believe it. Richard had been so confident, so smooth. Nobody suspected." "That's how people like Richard operate. They're charming right up until they're caught." Margaret pushed her food around her plate. She'd managed 3 bites, which was more than she'd expected. "What about David Kim? Did anyone talk to him?" "Sam said David's already been interviewed by the FBI. He's being called a hero whistleblower. Some business publication wants to do a profile on him." Daniel smiled. "Sam also said you're getting Sarah Mitchell installed as CEO by Monday." The board unanimously approved. "Good. Sarah will take care of the company. She'll take care of the employees." Margaret set down her fork. "That's all that matters now. Making sure Stone Enterprises survives without me." Emma had been eating quietly, but now she looked up. "Are you going to die soon?" The blunt question hung in the air. Daniel started to intervene. "Emma, that's not—" "It's okay." Margaret met Emma's gaze. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to die soon. Maybe a few weeks. Maybe a month or 2. The doctors can't say exactly." "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes. The medication helps, but yes. It hurts." "I'm sorry." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I wish my soup could fix you. I wish the stars on your cape were real magic that could make the cancer go away." Margaret's throat tightened. "Emma, your soup did fix me. Not my body that's too broken for soup to fix. But you fixed something else. You fixed the part of me that had given up. You reminded me why fighting matters even when you know you won't win." "But you did win. You beat the bad guy." "I beat the bad guy, but I'm still dying. Both things can be true." Margaret reached across the table and took Emma's small hand. "And that's okay. Because I got to finish my story the right way. I got to protect the people who depend on me. I got to make sure the bad guy faced consequences. I got to meet a little girl who draws capes and makes magical soup. Emma wiped her eyes with her free hand. When you die, will you tell my mommy I said hi? Daddy says she's in heaven. I think you'll probably go there too because you're good. Daniel's face crumpled. Emma? I'll tell her. Margaret said, her own eyes burning now. I'll tell her she raised a remarkable daughter, a daughter who knows that showing up matters, that making soup for strangers is important, that even dying people deserve to feel like they're worth fighting for. Emma nodded, satisfied with that answer. Okay. And tell her Daddy's doing good. He gets sad sometimes, but he always shows up for me. He never forgets to make breakfast or help with homework or any of that stuff. I think she knows that already. I think she's been watching you both. Margaret squeezed Emma's hand gently. And I think she's very proud. They finished dinner mostly in silence after that. Emma helped clear the table, insisting on washing dishes because that's what you do when someone feeds you. Daniel tried to protest, but Margaret waved him off. Let her help. It makes her feel useful. I understand that feeling. After the dishes were done, Emma curled up on Margaret's couch with a book she'd brought while Daniel helped Margaret back to her chair. You didn't have to do this, he said quietly. Feed us, let Emma bombard you with questions about dying. You should be resting. This is resting. This is the best rest I've had in months. Margaret settled into her chair, pulling the blanket over her lap. Daniel, can I ask you something personal? Of course. After your wife died, how long did it take before you could breathe again, before the grief wasn't the first thing you felt every morning? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I'm not sure I'm there yet. Some mornings I still wake up and forget she's gone. I reach for her side of the bed before I remember. He looked at Emma, absorbed in her book. But then Emma calls for me, needs help with something, tells me about a dream she had. And I remember I've got a reason to get up, a reason to keep breathing. That's what I've been missing, a reason to keep breathing. Margaret's voice was barely above a whisper. I built this company thinking that would be enough. That legacy would matter. But a company isn't a person. It can't love you back. It can't make you soup or draw you pictures. No. But it can employ 3,000 people who have families. People who will keep living and breathing because you fought for them today. Daniel sat down across from her. That matters too, Ms. Stone. Maybe not the same way Emma matters to me, but it matters. Call me Margaret. I think we're past formalities at this point. Margaret, then. Daniel smiled slightly. Emma's been calling you the soup lady to her friends at school. Says you're her friend who's sick, but very brave. I'm not brave, I'm just stubborn. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, they look pretty similar. Margaret laughed, which hurt, but felt good anyway. Maybe you're right. Maybe stubborn and brave are the same thing when you're too tired to know the difference. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sam. FBI arrested Richard officially. Multiple federal charges. He's being held without bail. It's over, Margaret. You won completely. She showed the text to Daniel. How does it feel? He asked. Knowing he's in custody. Knowing you stopped him. Empty. Full. Exhausted. Satisfied. Margaret set the phone down. All of it at once. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I just feel tired. Tired and ready to be done. Done fighting. Done with everything. Done being sick. Done being in pain. Done watching the calendar count down to an ending I can't control. She pulled the blanket tighter. I'm ready to let go, Daniel. I've been ready for weeks. The only reason I'm still here is because there was work to finish. Now it's finished. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. My wife said something similar 2 days before she died. Said she'd stayed as long as she could, but she was tired of fighting. Asked me if it was okay to stop. What did you tell her? I told her it was okay. That Emma and I would miss her every day for the rest of our lives, but that she'd fought long enough. That it was okay to rest. His voice cracked. And then I held her hand while she let go. Worst thing I ever had to do. Best thing I could have done for her. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I don't have anyone to hold my hand. No husband, no children. My parents are dead. I have business associates and board members and employees, but nobody who loves me. Nobody who'll sit with me at the end. That's not true. Emma's voice came from the couch. She'd set down her book and was looking at them both with her serious expression. We'll sit with you. Won't we, Daddy? Daniel's face worked with emotion. Emma, Ms. Stone, Margaret. She might want family with her. Real family, not strangers who brought soup, Margaret finished. She was crying openly now. Except you're not strangers anymore, are you? You're the people who showed up when no one else did. The people who stayed when everyone else left. So we'll stay now too. Emma said simply, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. When you're ready to go to heaven and see my mommy, we'll sit with you. You shouldn't be alone for that. Nobody should be alone for that. Margaret covered her face with her hands and sobbed. All the fear and pain and loneliness of the past 6 months came pouring out, and she couldn't stop it. Didn't want to stop it. She felt Daniel's hand on her shoulder. Felt Emma climb into her lap, despite being too big for it, wrapping thin arms around her neck. It's okay to cry, Emma whispered. Daddy cries sometimes too. Crying means you're sad, and being sad means you cared about things. That's good. They sat like that for a long time, Margaret crying, Emma holding her Daniel's steady presence beside them. Outside the windows, the city lights began to flicker on as evening fell. Life continued down there. People going home from work, making dinner, living their ordinary lives, unaware that 42 floors above them, a dying woman was learning what it meant to be loved at the end. Finally, Margaret's tears slowed. She wiped her eyes and managed a shaky breath. I'm sorry. That was human, Daniel said. That was human. You've been holding everything together for weeks. You earned a breakdown. I don't have time for breakdowns. I have... Margaret stopped. Actually, I don't know what I have left to do. I finished the work, saved the company, caught the bad guy, made sure everyone would be taken care of. She looked at Daniel helplessly. What do I do now? Now you live whatever time you have left, not as CEO Margaret Stone, just as Margaret. He smiled gently. You make peace with endings. You spend time with people who care about you. You let yourself be cared for instead of always being the strong one. I don't know how to do that. I've been the strong one my whole life. Then learn. You've got good teachers. Daniel gestured to Emma, who was still nestled in Margaret's lap. Emma's an expert at accepting help. She falls down, she lets me pick her up. She's sad, she lets me comfort her. She needs something, she asks. No shame, no pride getting in the way. Just honest need and honest acceptance. Emma nodded against Margaret's shoulder. Being strong means knowing when to let other people be strong for you. That's what Mommy used to say. She said families take turns being strong. But you're not my family. We could be, Emma said. If you want, we could be your family for however long you need us. Margaret looked at Daniel over Emma's head. She doesn't know what she's offering. The end, it's not pretty. It's not like in movies. It's painful and ugly, and... I know, Daniel said quietly. I was there for my wife's end, remember. I know exactly how ugly it gets. I also know that nobody should face that alone. Nobody should die thinking they didn't matter enough for someone to stay. Why would you do this? Why would you volunteer for something so hard? Because 3 years ago my wife was dying, and strangers, nurses, doctors, even the hospice social worker, they showed up. They sat with her when I had to take care of Emma. They held her hand when I was too exhausted to keep my eyes open. They made her last days bearable. Daniel's voice was steady. I can't repay them. They're professionals doing their jobs. But I can pay it forward. I can show up for someone else who needs it. And I can make soup, Emma added. Lots and lots of soup, with stars in the noodles. Margaret felt something break open in her chest. Not break like cracking, break like ice melting, like a door opening after being locked for decades. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Thank you. Yes. Please." The three of them sat together as the room grew darker and the city lights grew brighter. Emma eventually fell asleep in Margaret's lap. Daniel helped transfer her to the couch, covering her with Margaret's spare blanket. "She'll sleep for a few hours. She always does after emotional days." Daniel checked his watch. "I should probably get her home soon, though. School tomorrow." "Does she like school?" "Loves it. She's got this teacher, Mrs. Chen, who encourages her to write stories. Emma writes about adventures and magic and heroes who don't always win but always try." He smiled. "Wonder where she gets that from." "Definitely from you. You showed up for me every Tuesday and Friday with soup. That's a hero's journey if I've ever seen one." "I just brought soup. You're the one who fought a CFO and won." "We both did hard things. Let's call it even." Margaret shifted in her chair, trying to find a position that hurt less. "Daniel, when it gets close, and it will get close, probably soon, will you tell me? Will you be honest if I'm hanging on too long? If I should let go?" "If that's what you want? Yes, I'll be honest." He met her eyes. "But Margaret, you'll know. Your body will tell you. And when it does, I promise you won't be alone. Emma and I will be here. We'll hold your hand. We'll tell you it's okay to rest. Like you did for your wife. Like I did for my wife." Margaret nodded slowly. "I think I can accept that. I think I can let myself be vulnerable enough to die with people who care. That's not vulnerability. That's courage. Real courage, the kind Emma draws capes for." Over the next 2 weeks, a routine established itself. Daniel and Emma came every Tuesday and Friday, just like before. But now they stayed longer. Emma would do homework at Margaret's dining table, while Daniel helped with small tasks, changing light bulbs. Margaret couldn't reach, fixing a leaky faucet, organizing her medications. Sarah Mitchell visited twice, bringing updates on the company. Richard's trial was proceeding. Marcus Chen had completed the asset returns. The company was stable, recovering, thriving even. "You did it," Sarah said during her second visit. "You saved Stone Enterprises. 3,000 employees still have jobs because you fought when you could have just given up." "I had help. David, Kim, Jennifer, Sam, all the people who chose to do the right thing even when it was hard." Margaret was in bed most days now. The pain was intensifying despite increased medication. "Sarah promised me you'll take care of them. The people who helped, make sure they know their loyalty meant something." "I promise. David's already been promoted to Director of Financial Compliance. Jennifer is moving to a Senior Executive Assistant role with a significant raise. And Sam." Sarah smiled. "Sam's being retained as the company's primary counsel with a contract that pays him double his previous rate. He earned it." "Good. That's good." Margaret closed her eyes against a wave of nausea. "I'm tired, Sarah. I think I'm near the end." "How long?" "Days maybe, not weeks. I can feel it." She opened her eyes. "You're going to be an excellent CEO, better than I was. You actually care about people as people, not just as employees. I learned that from you. Every policy you ever implemented put people first. Paid family leave, mental health benefits. That employee hardship fund you created, do you know how many lives that saved?" Sarah's voice broke. "You built a company with a conscience, Margaret. That's rare. That matters." After Sarah left, Margaret lay in bed thinking about legacy. Not the financial legacy or the corporate empire, the human legacy. The people whose lives were different because she'd chosen to care. David Kim could afford his son's medication now. Jennifer's mother had good nursing care. 3,000 employees had jobs with benefits and dignity. And Daniel had a friend who understood what it meant to lose someone and keep going. Emma had a dying woman who'd taught her that showing up matters even when it's hard. That was worth something. That was worth staying for. On a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks after the board meeting, Margaret woke from a nap to find Emma sitting beside her bed, drawing quietly. "Hey, sweetheart, how long have you been here?" "About an hour. Daddy's making soup. He said you probably wouldn't feel like eating, but he wanted to make it anyway." Emma set down her crayons. "I'm drawing you again. Want to see? Always." This drawing was different from the others. The figure still had the purple cape with gold stars, but now there were 2 smaller figures beside her, one holding a wrench, one holding a bowl of soup. "That's us," Emma explained. "Me and Daddy. We're your sidekicks. Every superhero needs sidekicks." "I thought I was the sidekick. You're the one with the real magic, the soup, and the wisdom." "No, you're the main hero. We just help. That's what sidekicks do." Emma studied her drawing critically. "I made your cape really big. It has to be big enough to share with us. That's how you know it's a good cape." Margaret felt tears threatening again. She'd cried more in the past 3 weeks than in the previous 3 decades. "Emma, I need to tell you something. I'm going to die very soon. Probably this week. Maybe even today or tomorrow." Emma nodded seriously. "I know. Daddy told me. He said we should say goodbye soon because you might not be able to talk much longer." "Are you scared?" "A little. I was really scared when Mommy died, but Daddy stayed with her at the end and he said it was peaceful. He said she looked like she was finally done hurting." Emma took Margaret's hand. "Will you be done hurting?" "Yes, I'll finally be done hurting." "Then I'm sad but also a little happy for you. Is that okay?" "That's very okay. That's exactly right." Margaret squeezed the small hand in hers. "Emma, you saved my life. Not by keeping me alive, by making the time I had left worth living. You taught me that soup and drawings and showing up matter more than board meetings and profit margins. You taught me stuff too. You taught me that even grown-ups need help sometimes. That being sick doesn't mean you stop being strong. That fighting matters even when you don't win." Emma climbed carefully onto the bed, snuggling against Margaret's side. "And you taught me that family isn't just people you're born with. It's people who show up and stay." Daniel appeared in the doorway with soup. He stopped when he saw them together on the bed. "She just climbed up," Margaret said quickly. "I didn't." "It's fine. It's good." Daniel set down the soup and sat on the other side of the bed. "Margaret, I called your hospice nurse. She's coming this evening to assess your pain levels and adjust medications if needed. I also called Sam. He wants to visit tomorrow if you're up for it." "Tomorrow might be too late." "I know, but he understands that. He said to tell you that Richard's trial is proceeding and the prosecutor expects a guilty verdict on all counts. Minimum 20 years in federal prison." "Good. That's good." Margaret felt herself starting to drift, the edges of reality going soft. "Daniel, I need to know. Are you okay with this? With being here at the end, I know it brings back memories of your wife. Every day brings back memories of my wife. But these are good memories I'm making with you. Hard memories, but good ones." He took her other hand. "You're not a burden, Margaret. You're a friend. You're family. And I'm honored to be here." Emma yawned against Margaret's shoulder. "Can I ask you something? When you see my mommy, will you tell her I'm doing good, that Daddy takes care of me, and I'm learning to be strong like she taught me?" "I'll tell her. I'll tell her you're remarkable and brave and that you make the best soup in the world. It's really not that good. I always put in too much salt. It's the best soup I've ever had, because you made it with love. That's the secret ingredient that matters." They lay there together, a dying CEO, a widowed maintenance worker, and an 8-year-old girl who believed in soup and superheroes. Outside the windows, the city continued its evening rush. Inside, time slowed to something precious and finite. Margaret felt herself slipping away, not all at once, but gradually. Like sand through an hourglass, each grain a moment she'd fought to keep. "I'm ready," she whispered. "I'm ready to let go now." "We know," Daniel said gently. "We're here. We're holding on so you can let go." "Thank you, for the soup, for staying, for showing me that dying alone and dying lonely are different things. Thank you for letting us stay, for teaching Emma that fighting matters, for being brave enough to be vulnerable." Daniel's voice was thick with emotion. "Rest now, Margaret. You've earned it." Emma pressed a kiss to Margaret's cheek. "Goodbye, Soup Lady. Tell Mommy I love her. Tell her I miss her. Tell her Daddy's doing good." "I will. I promise." Margaret's voice was fading now, but she managed one more sentence. "Emma, never stop making soup. Never stop showing up. Never stop believing that caring too hard is the most important thing." "I won't. I promise." Margaret Stone died 3 hours later on a Friday evening in her penthouse 42 floors above Manhattan. She died with Daniel Torres holding one hand and Emma Torres holding the other. She died knowing she'd finished her story the right way. She died having learned that legacy isn't measured in dollars or board seats, but in the people you teach to show up, to stay, to care. She died wearing an invisible cape covered in purple and gold stars. She died knowing that somewhere an 8-year-old girl would keep making soup for strangers, would keep drawing capes for people who needed reminding. They were heroes, would keep believing that showing up matters even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.